Hello, I'm Colette and we're here today delivering News Round 17. We're talking about the theme days that we've been running and which have been part of the big lottery funding we received. And this has all been delivered through CommunicationID. Now so far we've been delivering deaf and interpreter awareness all across London. We've been going out to different organisations. But we've been really shocked at the amount of people that have requested training relevant to specific areas such as art, mental health, education, LGBT, elderly, and so on and so forth. It's been quite shocking. So it made us think. And we decided to set up specific theme days focusing on those particular areas. And today is our mental health theme day. Do you want to come in and have a look? Have fun.
My name's Andrew.
All other things that happen in your life. About
To be a very long, convoluted problem, if it ever happens at all.
No, I'm interviewing a person who's called Steve Powell. Steve Powell? Yeah, this is Steve Powell. I've got some interviews with Steve there. Hello there. Right, I have two questions for you, please. Thank you for a lovely presentation today. It was very clear, and I hope the audience got a lot of awareness from that. I've got a question about how do you feel about the responses and the questions from the hearing audience? Do you think they benefited from today? Was that of interest?
Yeah, I think they did. When you were presenting, I was watching their faces to see whether I was boring them or whether I was making them giving interesting information. And there was clearly a lot of interest. You could see their heads nodding, you could see their eye contact, and they were obviously learning something. If you can give people new information and make it interesting, I think you've succeeded. So I hope the audience actually found that interesting. We covered quite a lot of information in quite a short period of time.
Yeah, I do agree with that, yeah, but I really enjoyed it myself as well. I've had some eye-openers too as well today, it's been brilliant. My second question, in terms of deaf and hearing psychologists and kind of how they interact with the patients, what are the main differences that are needed?
I think a deaf person, a psychiatrist or psychologist that has a good deaf awareness can sign is the only way of actually treating deaf people effectively. And even then, they wouldn't do it by themselves. I think the best psychiatrists are people who will have an interpreter, they'll have a deaf person there, as well as themselves. And by having three together, it means that they're getting a much better understanding of what picture the patient is giving them. As I said, it's so easy to miss a small sign. If the doctor's writing down notes, he's not observing the patient all the time. The interpreter is probably having to process things in their brain, and so they may miss things, but the deaf person is concentrating one-to-one, and therefore they will start to build up a background behind what the patient is actually saying in sign language.
I noticed that a lot of hearing psychologists, but what about the equivalent in terms of deaf professionals? Do you know what the percentages are?
It's very few. There's one psychiatrist who is primarily deaf, and that's Margaret Defer.
Margaret Defer.
Defer, D-E-F-U-E, Defer, Margaret Defer, who now works in Northern Ireland. But of course she grew up with hearing and became deaf later in life. But she's very fluent in sign language. And there are a couple of psychologists, clinical psychologists who are deaf. We employ one called Sarah Powell. And she's a psychologist who's profoundly deaf. Sarah Powell's not, she might have come from Wales, but she certainly works, did a training in Manchester, John Denmark, and she works up in the northwest. And she works as our what they call step 3 IAPT worker. So she works with people with more severe mental health problems.
Okay, that's really interesting. But when you do the comparisons, will there be more hearing psychologists that would be fluent in sign language, or should it be more deaf professionals?
Ideally, we want more deaf professionals. There are very few. The training to become a doctor, a psychiatrist, psychologist is so intense. It is very difficult for a deaf person to get through that training, not because they may not be intellectually capable, but of course they've got to have note takers, interpreters. There's so many barriers which can stop them from being able to get those qualifications. You've got to be a very good, strong person to get through to that type of level of qualification.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
RSTUE.
Hello. I'm going to interview one of the participants in today's session. Welcome, Roger.
Hello.
So what have you found today? What's been your experience?
Well, I'm quite happy to see that people here who obviously know nothing about deafness, especially deafness and mental health, and in terms of how to use interpreters, I'm happy to see that they're here today for that.
I wanted to ask you, what's the most common condition that affects the deaf community's mental health in the UK?
Well, there's 3 really. Stress, anxiety, and the main one probably, which is depression. So it's those 3.
And why is it that those conditions are the most prevalent?
Well, with depression, for example, it's usually to do with lack of communication, and deaf people have limited communication compared to hearing people, and a lot of people don't really understand what the phrase mental health really means. They automatically assume it's a really complicated problem, but it could be something really simple, like, for example, maybe your pet has died and you're very upset. Hearing people can just pick up the phone and talk to people about their problems and explain that their pet has died, but deaf people have less ability to do that.
That's right.
And so the depression can begin there, and then something else can happen to make it worse, and your confidence will drop as well as a result of that.
Indeed. So where do you think are the best services, or what are the best services to alleviate this issue?
Well, it's most important really to make sure that people out there understand how mental health, especially depression, can affect you, and how it can affect your physical health. And the other thing is access for deaf people in terms of primary care can be problematic as well. And that can cause a deterioration in health as well, in their physical health, which means that the mental health can follow suit. And so it's a downward spiral. If you have good physical health, then you might have less mental health problems. Or if it's the other way around, if you have poor mental health, you might have poor physical health. So these things are connected.
Do you think that in the Greater London area there are good services for deaf people's access to mental health services?
Well, no, not really. And one of the reasons for that is because a lot of GPs or mental health services that are out there don't have an awareness of the specialised service that there is in South West London, St George's and Tooting. And it's really important to make sure that deaf people go and access that service, because it's much better, especially for the NHS, and through commissioning, there needs to be a greater awareness that that service is there.
Do you think there is an awareness around London that that service is there?
Well, most people know it's there. Not all, but most. And that lack of awareness is there because of changes in service and changes in personnel as well. Somebody might get referred to that service in the first instance, but then staff might change, and the replacement staff come in and are not aware of this service.
So there's not enough information when a new staff member joins about
No.
the services that are out.
No, definitely not.
That's very interesting. How can we improve this issue?
It's to do with training and education, really. And simultaneously, a lot of PCTs unfortunately say that they don't have the money for training, which is a false economy. Because, you know, if somebody with a mental health problem goes to a mainstream mental health service or hospital, for example, they might improve a little, but it'll be a very prosaic improvement. Whereas if they go to somewhere like Old Church, for example, it'll be much more rapid because they have the right communication tools there.
So it's a better service.
Definitely, most
Thank
definitely.
you so much for your time,
Not a
Roger.
problem.
Bye-bye.